Hello. My last video was all about what I take along to Repair Cafe and what I do to prepare and get ready for volunteering at one of these sessions. This video, I'm just going to take you through what I did at the last Repair Cafe I volunteered at the Boiler House. Um, it's quite a lengthy video, so what I'm going to do is just fast forward through some bits and just do a bit of a voiceover and talk through what took place. I did promise not to record anyone's faces, so please don't be too disappointed the fact that you don't see absolutely everything that's going on. But I think it's only quite right that we shouldn't be filming people if they don't want to be on the internet, etc. Just quickly, a few words about the boiler house itself. So it's a boiler house. It's a building that used to have a sort of effectively central heating for the local estate. I'm not quite sure when the building was founded, but it's decommissioned now and it's used as a community hub. Lots of cool things go on there. Obviously, the repair cafe, but they do woodworking, they do men's sheds. They've got, I think, Chorlton Bikes works out of there. They've got a bike repair shop and loads of other brilliant community initiatives that happen at the happen at the Boiler House. So you can see the sign just there. There's a small reception area there with some comfy sofas and a small kitchenette where people can get drinks whilst they register their repair, and um, they will just wait for one of the repairers to come along. So just showing you some of the bits that are across the boiler house. A big, massive building, really, really cool to go and work in. And they allow us to use one of the rooms, a couple of tables. We only had two volunteers at the last session, which is not enough to be honest. We probably need 4 or 5 volunteers. So hopefully, watching the video, you'll see some of the things that we do. I only had 2 items that I worked through. The first one was a retro style telephone. So it's actually a modern telephone that you can connect to your landline, but it was in the fashion of those old dial telephones. It had been to a previous repair cafe in a different part of Manchester, but they ran out of time because I think the lady took it in towards the end of the session. So they tried to do what they could, but they packaged it back up and uh, she came along to my side to see if she could get it repaired. Probably one of the more challenging things that you get is where someone's tried to start a repair and then you just get handed a box of bits. This particular one was even more challenging because when she handed it across to me, it rattled, indicating there were lots of broken parts inside. Not exactly sure what had happened, but she said it had an accident, and some things got smashed inside. But I can't quite tell how, because of the outside of it was absolutely immaculate, but the inside of it had lots of damage on the inside. As you can see, all the pieces falling out as they open up. Now, I don't know how much of that was from being partly dismantled by the previous repair cafe and how much of it was from the accident. So I'm gonna fast forward through this quite quickly because this on its own was just about over an hour. So I'm just cleaning my sort of clip-on specs so I could have a look at what I was doing. I was probably taking some deep breaths at the time as well because I was realising how much of a hospital pass this probably was. So there were wires that were desoldered, there were components that were not on there, there were plastic lugs off the base had been snapped off altogether. So it had a proper old whack. Uh, it's bizarre how the casing wasn't damaged and yet the internals were quite badly damaged. So no idea what had happened to the happened to it. So the first thing I did was just resoldered the 2 wires on there. They were quite straightforward because of the fact that they were red and black, so ground and a positive, so quite easy to find. The next piece, there was a capacitor that had broken off, and one of the legs on the capacitor was less than a millimeter long, so I wasn't really going to have much chance of soldering the original capacitor back on. Equally, it was very difficult to see where it had come off. there were several places on that circuit board where the capacitor could have come from. I think there were three. You can just about see it in the video. There were three sort of circle elements on there where capacitors could be placed. And quite common on PCB designs, you'll see that there'll be markings for components that are not used. So the designers may create a more sort of generic PCB that's used for multiple different applications. So PCB, by the way, is a printed circuit board, and that's just the green board that all the components get soldered onto. I could tell that two of the locations where the capacitor was marked on the board had signs of previous soldering on there, so potentially there was a second capacitor that had come off which wasn't in there, but I only had the one loose part. So I looked at the part. I did have enough to measure it on my LCR meter, which effectively measures the capacitance of a capacitor. And that allowed me to just make sure that I could find an equivalent value. So you'll see that I'm sort of putting in like a black capacitor. They're different sizes, but effectively they do the same job. As long as they're the same capacitance and the voltage is either the same or rated higher, then the capacitor would be absolutely fine. So soldering that on, then what comes next? I'm just trying to remember. I think I started trying to figure out where some of the connectors went back onto the telephone, and this was a bit of a puzzle. I probably was a bit short-sighted. I only looked at the this like the blue casing itself. I didn't look at the base. If I'd looked at the base, I'd have had a better clue later on. Then I noticed there are a couple of switches that should be on the bottom of the telephone. One of the switches was just completely destroyed, so there was no way that I was going to be able to fix that. If I remember correctly, that switch was just high and low, so it was probably just controlling the volume of the telephones. It wasn't critical. So I talked through with the lady that brought it in. We agreed not to try to do anything about that because of I think she'd already seen how challenging this was going to be. Another switch that's on there had also broken off the plastic, so a little bit of super glue, popping it on. It wasn't very steady or sturdy, so I popped it on. Then I did get out some sort of UV resin. So if I fast forward a little bit quicker, I really struggled to get the thing on. There we go. Put the UV resin on as well. This is quite good, so it can build up the sides, give it a blast of UV light, and it hardens really strong. Makes a really solid repair, although not solid enough as we might find out later on. So get it all connected back up. And if I scroll forwards, is it around about now? Right, okay, so yeah, there were these plastic lugs that had actually come off the base that was still screwed into the circuit boards. I had to get all those super glued back on again. So really, this is more like a jigsaw puzzle than an actual repair. So bits of UV resin on there as well to just hold them in place as best we can. These are always quite tricky because of you're on limited time, and really you want to let things cure properly and really get solid before you start to want to put things back together. Really difficult to do in a time constrained windows as we have at the Repair Cafe. I get very sort of conscious of the fact that there's a waiting room full of people that have probably got much simpler fixes, and they're just sat there patiently trying to get something repaired. Only two of us were there that day, so it's you feel a bit guilty that people are waiting for their things to be looked at, and you end up spending so much time with one person. I think in hindsight, maybe I should have just said that this was probably a little bit beyond the time frame that we have. Right, okay, so I think I'd skipped forward some of this video when I was cutting the videos together. So I've got the switch back on. You'll also notice that there's this red piece on the right hand side. That was the killer piece. So could get it back in, could attach it to the springs, but unfortunately the plastic had snapped altogether, so there wasn't really going to be much more that could be done. The next thing that came in was this lamp. So, lovely young couple uh, had brought in this lamp. The chap was really good. I tried to recruit him as a repairer because he'd done lots of sort of diagnostics already. He checked his electrics at home and he cabled up the lamp to a 3-pin plug, but the lamp still wasn't lighting up. So asked him loads of questions, and he had a really good sort of a sort of diagnostic mind, but just maybe not the experience of working with electronics directly. He works in tech, doing some sort of laptop engineering, so I think he had that kind of diagnostic mindset. So uh, it came down to the fact that there's a some form of power supply inside that sort of silver base of the lamp. So took it out, started testing all the way around. There was some dark scarring on the circuit board, can be quite common. Um, Sometimes that's just what happens. So if electronics heat up, and over time they can cause parts of a circuit board to get dark and discoloured. I think it's where you see real kind of explosive charring and dark marks that you want to really sort of zoom in on what might be wrong, or you might have a blown component. So I started testing around. There's some diodes on the side, so I was just testing those through, tested all the resistors. Um, Everything checked out fine, and just working my way through everything that I could that is sensible to check. My last power supply, I think, took me 3 or 4 hours to figure out what I'd done wrong. So eventually, that last one got fixed, but it's not the sort of thing that I'd spend 4 hours on in the repair cafe situation with people sat in front of me. So I'm just testing all the basics. Then, as I go along, I think I noticed that on there's a metal part there that's got some transistors uh, sort of, bolted onto. So that's obviously some form of heat sink to take the heat away from those transistors. Um, so as I go along, I noticed that on the top of that heatsink, there was an electrical component being held flush against the heatsink itself. So I started thinking, well, could that be a thermal fuse? So as we go along, let's see where we get to on this. Fast forward a little bit more. It's still testing as many components as I possibly could. Then is this point where I recognize it? Right, okay, so I take the heat shield off. It's probably when I take the heat shield, the heat sink, I should say, not heat shield. And it's just used to spread heat around. So, right, that's where I've got that blue tool. That's where the uh, thermal fuse was attached to the heat sink. I saw that was my aha moment, and started testing it. Found that thermal fuse had blown. So of either it had too much current going through, so it just acts like a normal fuse, or it had um, detected, a high temperature of some sort, and so it would blow in that sense as well. So going along, testing the fuse out of circuit just to make sure absolutely dead. So at least we know that was what was wrong. My eyesight's terrible and the thing was tiny, so I had to get out my little digital scope just so I could read the text that was on there. I think it was rated at 2 amps and something like 125 degrees C. Now, you'd never want components on the circuit board to go over probably 70C. So, that was quite highly rated, but obviously it's there as a safety device if there's some sort of short circuit and a fire within that ceiling grows, that it will just cut out the power to the device altogether. So I started looking through my spares. I didn't have that particular thermal fuse, which is a bit annoying, but I think the stuff I've got is more for cooking appliances rather than lighting. Then had looked through the Moss Side Repair Cafe kit. and they had exactly the right rated thermal fuse. Actually, if I look on that, yeah, so it's 135, not 125. So I fitted the fuse. If I quickly burn through this. At this point, I'm just explaining to them what's happened and what's going on. Probably still heavily trying to recruit the guy, um, because he did seem like he was itching to have a go, and he'd already had to look at a few things himself. Later on in the video, he reassembles the light before we do a final test. So he's definitely got the aptitude. So hopefully he'll come back. I just said, come along to any of the repair cafes. We'd be more than happy to have him shadow us and talk him through working with us. So I've got the thermal fuse fitted. Luckily, I had a 12-volt uh, lamp in my kit, which is really quite useful. So it means that I could test that power supply without using the original light fitting. So at least we can eliminate whether that light fitting itself has a fault. So we know that the power supply is working. I think I do a big crossed fingers point just before I do power it on. But I was relatively confident at that point that it was just the thermal fuse. Drinking my cold coffee that had been there for about an hour and a half. Then what I wanted to do was rig this up so that I could just test it and see if it's working. Now I've got a device called a quick test. So it does what it says. So you can quickly connect the three mains cables at the bottom. It has a little neon bulb in there to alert you that the mains is powered on. And as you put the red cover down, the power goes on. So if you look at the bulb, it's gone on. So if I scroll back and forth, so you can see that the power supply is working. So we know that works. I was a little bit concerned. Um, it being a light fitting, I didn't want all of a sudden to have reports that someone's house had burnt down. So what I did was I left it powered on and dug out the thermal camera just to have a look to see if anything on the circuit board was getting extraordinarily hot. Nothing really showed signs of that, so I was not too concerned about it. On the thermal camera, I don't think anything got over like 40 degrees, so nothing was amazingly hot. Plus, the heatsink wasn't on there at that point, so that would have meant that those components would have had nothing taking away the heat. So I felt more comfortable about that power supply. It does raise a question about what caused it to blow, what was wrong. So, you know, in as it is now, it's working, but that then kind of raises questions about the light fitting itself. So take it all apart. Um, just wanted to, at this point, I wanted to make sure that the thermal fuse was fitted in neatly, because ultimately it needs to be flush against the heatsink so that if the heatsink ever did get too hot, the thermal fuse would blow and stop the power from going to the unit altogether and stop a fire from happening. But this was really fiddly to get back together. Lots of messing about with forceps and needle nose pliers, because there were small nuts that went on the inside of the heatsink, with the bolts on the outside. So you're having to try to hold something on the inside in small cramped space, lots of little components in there. So there's no way you get your fingers in there. So I had to use the forceps. On the other side, I think I used the needle nose pliers to hold the nut on the other side. But yeah, definitely was quite a faff. Then trying to get the thermal fuse back in and resoldered. It was a bit of a struggle, this one. Give me a block top hoover any day, easy peasy. But no, these are quite fun, quite interesting, quite satisfying knowing that you fix something that is you found the root cause on the power supply itself and got the power supply working. So I quickly burned through all this, had to take it apart again, get the thermal fuse back in, put the heatsink back on. Oh my word, it was a bit of a struggle. So get through all this. whilst I'm doing all this, I'm always chatting to whoever I'm working with, either to explain what I'm doing or just having a bit of a chin wag and find out about their lives and things like that. This couple used to live in London and they moved up. And I think they had similar experience to me because I used to live in London as well. And when I moved up, it was a bit of a shock with the change in the weather, and they had the same as well. Funnily enough, the lady from the telephone, she'd actually moved from Scotland to Manchester for the good weather. So, swings and roundabouts, isn't it? I wouldn't change my decision to move to Manchester. Absolutely love it up here. So, right, it's just the second time I'm fitting this heatsink. So that's going on. Lots of fiddling around, keeping my fingers crossed. Then I think shortly, oh no, I'm still fitting it. Shortly, I think I give the power supply to the chap to put back into light fitting, and then we give it a final test. And I think we'd already run over the time of the cafe. So I know that there were some people that were disappointed that day. It's really difficult though. You get so far after half an hour. Maybe you should learn to call it, but I don't like doing that. I like to keep going if I think there is a chance we will get that fixed. So this is me just making sure that all of the soldering is nice and secure. Just testing, got no bridge contacts. Right, okay, so uh, he brought it over and connected it all back up, talked me through what he was doing, and we were just making sure that it was wired up properly. Now, sadly, when we tested it in the light fitting, something flashed, which you don't get on camera, but the whole thing stopped working again. So there was obviously a short circuit in the actual fitting with the bulbs, not the power supply. So when that happened, he did mention that just before it stopped working, the day before it stopped working, he had tried to change a bulb and he had some trouble getting the ball back in. So I wonder if there was something wrong with the fitting itself, and so there was a short in the wiring of the actual um, the light fitting. So ultimately, the fuse was doing its job. A short circuit had happened, too much current had gone through, so the fuse had blown. Really, really frustrating, but at least at least we kind of understood what was there. We had run out of time, so it wasn't going to be able to sit there and just check all of the fittings on the light itself. It's annoying that we didn't get the flash on video. I didn't see it myself. The chap saw it when he powered it on, and that's yeah. I'm just checking a few bits there. So unfortunately, the actual light fitting didn't work, but we know that we got the power transformer worked. So we know that the fault isn't in the power supply; it's in the fitting itself. We'd run out of time, so we had to call it a day at that point, and that was it for Repair Cafe in Moss Side. So a bit of a taster of what it's like to do Repair Cafe. And not all things that come in are as challenging as that, but just a bit of a flavour of what happens. Most things that come in you can fix much quicker. Toasters with stuff stuck in them, or blocked hoovers and things like that. So um, two challenging fixes. The chap that's volunteering on the other table, he had some challenging ones as well. So it was a bit of a tough one at the weekend, but still, nonetheless, we tried our best. We tried to get these working. So um, if you're ever interested, have a look on the Repair Cafe website. You can find loads of repair cafes all over the country. Just give them a call, or drop them an email, or however they've got their messaging set up. Just ping them a message, and I think most of them will be more than happy to get you come along, and we can show you what to do and shadow with us. All right, okay, thanks all. Bye.